Welcome everybody to the live webinar here at BINA. God has given me the unbelievable blessing that this Sunday, please God, I will be giving my son a bris, a circumcision. This is a mitzvah, this is a commandment which the Jewish people have been doing for the past 3,000 years, all the way back to the first Jew, Avraham Avinu. Now, there are a lot of preparations to do before the bris, but one of them is not to get a written consent form from the baby to do the bris. And the reason is obvious, because he's too young. He is younger than the age of consent. In order to consent to something, you need to be intellectually mature. The baby is 8 days old, cannot choose to do or not to do something. Now, the question is, why would we do it that way? In terms of the question, how can we do something without the baby's consent, that is actually not such a big question, because the answer is obvious. Since God has commanded us to do it, it actually doesn't make a difference if we consent to it or not. This is God's command, this is what we need to do. And we can trust in God that this is the right thing to do for the baby and will only enhance his life, not the other way around. But the question is more, why do we do it this way? Wouldn't it be greater if we waited till the baby grew up, till the age of bar mitzvah, and then we can say that not the baby anymore, but the child is already intellectually mature, can choose for himself, and then the child will get a bris? Wouldn't that be more noble than just being 8 days old, not knowing what's happening to you, and someone else gives a bris to you without you knowing that it even happened? What kind of connection to God does that bring out when something just happens to you without you choosing to? Wouldn't it be better to wait till the child gets older and then give the bris with the child's consent? That can be considered the child's sacrifice, the child's doing. Before we answer this question, I would like to just digress for a second and discuss an interesting idea about a bris. When a bris happens, there are two brachos, there are two blessings which are said on the bris. One of them is traditionally recited by the moil, the one who does the circumcision, and that is al mitzvahs milah, like a regular blessing that we say that God has commanded us to do the circumcision. But then there's a second blessing, and that second blessing is what the father traditionally makes, and that is lahachnisoi bebrisoi shel Avraham Avinu, that we are blessing God, that He has allowed us to bring in the child into the covenant of Abraham, our forefather. Now, we know that there were many mitzvahs, or a few mitzvahs, which were given before the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. For example, bris milah, circumcision. Another example is gid hanosha, not eating a certain part of the animal, the thigh. Another example is Shabbos. Shabbos was given before Matan Torah, before the giving of the Torah. However, the Rambam tells us that when we keep a mitzvah now, we keep the mitzvahs because they were given at Mount Sinai. We don't keep the mitzvahs because they were given to Abraham or to the Jews in Egypt or right after they left Egypt. We keep the commandments because they were all given again, including those that were already given before. They were all given again after the giving of the Torah, or by the giving of the Torah, and that is the basis upon which we keep the mitzvahs. Why it is that way is for another discussion. According to that, would beg the question, why when we make the blessing on the bris milah, on the circumcision, do we attribute this to Abraham? Shouldn't we say that thank God for allowing us to do His command, which He commanded us at Mount Sinai, or commanded us in general? Why are we specifically relating this back to Abraham when we don't keep the mitzvah of circumcision because Avraham Avinu did it? We keep it because we were commanded to on Mount Sinai. And there's a very interesting explanation in this, given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that what is the greatness of Avraham Avinu regards to circumcision? You know, you can imagine when the airplane was first invented and the first flight that a person boarded must have been a very daring exercise to do. No one else has done this before. There's no history to prove that this is safe. And nevertheless, the first person walked onto the plane and flew that plane. Similarly, if you arrive at an amusement park, a brand new roller coaster has just been built, you're the first one to try it out. That's very difficult. When you know that somebody's been there already, been there and done that, then although, yes, it actually might not be 100% safe, or easy, but since someone has done it so many times already, it's much easier for you to then do it. And the same thing is about circumcision. The greatness of Avraham Avinu is that he was the first person to circumcise himself. There was never such a thing before. God appeared to Abraham, let alone the fact that he was 99 years old, and told him, circumcise yourself. No human being had ever done that before. And nevertheless, he went and he did it. You would think that now that we circumcise ourselves, it's not as great, because Abraham already did it. My father did it. His father did it. All the way back to Avraham Avinu. But nevertheless, it's not true. That may be true regarding all the other commandments, or regarding a bris, it's not true. Because when does this calculation make sense? When you can understand what's happening. When someone can explain to you and say that yes, it's painful, yes, it's hard, but you should know someone's done it before, so it's not that bad. But a baby who is 8 days old, there's no rationalizing with the baby that the pain that you're going through should be easy because know that your father did it and your grandfather did it all the way back all the generations. Such a rationale will not talk to the baby. In the baby's world, in the child's world, he is the first and last person to have done this. And therefore, when we do a bris on a child, we say la'achnisai bebrisa shel Avraham Avinu, meaning that this child's bris is exactly like Avraham Avinu's bris. Just like Avraham Avinu's bris was the first one, so to this child's bris, it is as if it is the first one. Now going back to our original question, we know that when Avraham Avinu gave himself a bris, afterwards God commanded him to circumcise his entire household, including his son Yishmael. However, we know that Yishmael was 13 years old at the time of his bris. The first one to have a bris at the age of 8 days old was Yitzchak, Isaac, Abraham's son. What is the significance of 8 days specifically? And the answer is that we know that the natural order of the world was created with the number 7. And there are many examples for this, but the most obvious one is the fact that there are 7 days of the week. And that's the way the world runs. The natural order of the world runs within the number 7. The idea of a bris, the whole concept of circumcision, is beyond nature, like we will soon explain. And that is why, halachically, although generally speaking you're not allowed to cause a wound to yourself on Shabbos, that is forbidden to do on Shabbos, nevertheless, generally speaking, not in all cases, I want you to consult a rabbi, but generally speaking, a bris actually pushes off Shabbos and we do a bris on Shabbos. And the reason is because Shabbos, although it is very holy, but it is holiness within nature. It is the 7th day of the week. It is the holy part, the holiest part of nature. A bris transcends nature and therefore can push away Shabbos regarding the bris. Why is a bris higher than nature? In terms of the person, in terms of ourselves and our makeup, we have the, so to speak, natural part of ourselves, and we have the supernatural part of ourselves. The natural part of ourselves is our intellect and emotions. Generally speaking, our normal way of living is through thinking and feeling. That's what we do. What we understand is right, that's what we do. What we understand is wrong, hopefully we don't do. And even more so, what we feel is right, we do. And what we feel is good, what we feel is bad, we hopefully do not do. However, our relationship with God is not based on the natural side of ourselves, rather on the supernatural side of ourselves. Meaning, when you connect to something through rationale, through intellect, through emotions, that means that there's the something, and there's you, and you need to discover that thing through thinking about it, through feeling it. However, our relationship to God is not a relationship between two separate things, rather it is a relationship between things which are in truth one entity. Us and God are totally united in one entity. And therefore our connection to God is through faith, something which transcends logic, transcends feeling. It's about who we are. This is who we are, whether we understand it or not. And therefore the bris is when the child is not specifically not able to understand what he's doing. If we would start the child's Judaism off when he's intellectually mature to make his own choices, that would mean that his connection to Judaism is because of his logic, because of his rationale, because of his feeling. We therefore introduce him into the bris shel Avraham Avinu, the covenant of Abraham, specifically when he has absolutely no intellect, when he has virtually no feeling and no understanding. And then we say, we are circumcising you, we are bringing you into the Jewish nation, because your connection to the Jewish nation, your connection to God, is something which defies logic and is beyond any reason. And therefore we give the child the bris on the 8th day which transcends nature, because the Jewish people transcend nature in general and also transcend their own nature. They transcend their logic, their logic and their feeling, and their connection to God is who we are. Have a good day.